So we split off from the first group in like the last hour or so. So this was like 1 hour. So our project was like preventing AI misuse. So we want to prevent AI being used for like used by bad actors for like making viruses, making nuclear weapons, for example. And so we want to work within the current institutional frameworks to regulate AI, to regulate like the misuse that occurs, to regulate the outcomes rather than what these models can or cannot do, because that is much harder. And we don't want to reinvent the wheel. There are issues with the existing regulatory framework. It's captured. It's a very bureaucratic, but then we don't want to reinvent the wheel and throw out the baby with the bathwater. And so, yeah. So success would be like having, so one of the cases that, not cases, one of the legislations that recently went through, I think Connecticut, was when they outlawed deepfakes. So that was like a very concrete thing that you can outlaw and make it illegal. So that would be things that we would want to do with like things preventing AI misuse and using the existing legal frameworks to regulate that. So
I could add something. There's lots of valid skepticism about whether existing regulatory frameworks can keep up, right? Whether they even work today at all. And here it's like the full gamut of everything from international human rights accords and things like the International Criminal Court to regulation of medical devices and software, right? Perhaps we can use AI to make those processes more accountable, more agile, detect corruption and fraud in the applications of those sorts of things to enhance them. And the second, there actually, I guess there are like 3 points total, right? One was extend the existing regime, try to make them more agile, able to keep up, put more AI experts inside the regulatory regimes around the world, and have them communicate with each other more effectively. The second was, could we, rather than worrying about open sourcing the whole AI system, could we focus on open sourcing guardrails, right? So the systems that might, and for this the inspiration might be the way that the international tech community responded as spam started to appear on an email and other systems, where not only did we harden the email infrastructure, make it so that it was harder to send an email claiming to come from president@whitehouse.gov, but we also added systems like Vipple's Razor and real-time block lists and others to try to match against patterns, match against Bayesian kind of senses of whether this is likely to be spam, that sort of thing. And it was an iterative, rapidly improving, highly granular kind of approach that allowed local decision making over which filters to adopt, but that systematically had the effect of making spam much more expensive than it started out being, right? So if we can do the same thing if most of us agree that like an AI system that spits out instructions on how to build a bomb is a bad idea, build an open source guardrail that detects that, tries to catch it, tries to keep it from being output to the end user, and allow locally decisions, whether in a regulatory framework or simply an ethical framework, do I want to adopt that guardrail or not, and allow those to be easily updated, that sort of categorized, that sort of thing. And then the third was simply better, can we use AI tools to get more objective evaluations of models, of systems, but also the end use of those to be able to help the regulators, help build these open source guardrails, that sort of thing. So, Fazil, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add.
Just, I guess you may be thinking, well, the EU AI Act exists, and this is pretty much what they're trying to do. I guess the main issue with the AI Act is that regulators don't necessarily know how to enforce these regulations on the users or the developers. So one way that we could help with the standards and policies is to actually simulate some of these environments for them in order to come up with the potential paths in which models could be misused. So I was very excited by the team that did the demonstration around game playing AIs in different parts of the environment or the economy that could allow us to extract some of these potential misuses. But yeah, I think it's a hard challenge, but we got to do something about it. Thanks.
Great, thanks. Questions, comments, helpful feedback?
How would you deal with catastrophic misuse?
By trying to anticipate them, acknowledging the limitations of, the question was how do you prevent catastrophic misuse? No one could ever claim omniscience. No one can ever claim perfect foresight. You can try to anticipate it, and you can get ahead of that by building guardrails that anticipate it even before you see that kind of thing happening. And if you make the case that that is a commonly shared view, a lot of people will adopt it, right? You don't require it, you don't mandate it, which means there are always going to be holes, but there is no effective legal regime short of dictatorial, control that keeps bad actors from being able to do bad things. So if you can make the defaults to do the good things, if you can make it easy to adopt the good, to adopt the right kind of guardrails, then you have a shot at preventing that kind of thing. But you have to continuously iterate. And the ability to iterate and update and improve is perhaps more important than having perfect prescience.
So I really like the guardrails thing. I think one of the biggest problems we're seeing now is that it's really hard to define, like even specify what the guardrail would be and then go about enforcing it. I generally, like, if there are people you're talking to about this kind of thing, I would love to talk to them as well and see if I can see if I can encourage or support that. Do you have a sense of how you would go about defining or specifying guardrails for something like language, like don't express how to make a bomb in a way that is like meaningfully different from don't, ideally would have more rigor than like the set of principles you get from constitutional AI, which are interpreted at scale, or something where there's like, it's easy to interpret a difference between here's instructions to make a bomb, but here's just Granny's stories, like bedtime stories about her time at the napalm factory.
Right. I think it inevitably has to be a local decision, and you have to account for that the filters might get it wrong. So in the anti-spam world, I mean, how many of you have had to look in your spam folders for an email that was miscategorized, right? Making available to, perhaps not to the end users, here's the results that we kept from telling you, but at least to the operators of the last mile who used an AI system to deliver something, here's the stuff we filtered out. You might want to double check that we're filtering the right stuff, and if not, you might want to tune your filters. And by branding those filters or categorizing those filters, one is a category of stuff to prevent weapons making. Another is a category of stuff to prevent other kinds of unethical behavior, right? Having sliders for people to deploy these things at the last mile to be able to dial those up and down, perhaps with, again, a healthy set of defaults, and perhaps even in some industries, like in medically regulated devices, some of those filters that might be mandatory, right? Because the collective wisdom of the medical regulators in a certain country has said, this is the right set of filters for us to use. This is our official blessed filters. If you do this, then you can have a certified product in this field. That aligns, I think, with existing regulatory approaches, yet still allowing local control.
This feels very compelling. I would love to talk about proof of concept
Okay.
stuff for this kind of thing.
Yeah. Excellent.
Oh, there's one more. Oh, I really like the idea of making the analogies with decisions we made to make the internet better back then, even though people were not able to predict the full scale and the extent and how people really use the internet. They made good decisions. My question for the spam thing is that right now there's this notion that maybe we shouldn't tell people we're evaluating on against bad players, because if you tell them, then they like bypass it more easily. What's your thought on that?
Well, this was very much a concern in the anti-spam space because those filters are public, and bad actors could train their spam against those filters and find the approaches that defeat them. It turns out in the bad actors, you have a curve like you have in any industry where you've got lead innovators and users, and then the masses, right? And people who automate kind of tools or automate approaches adopted by the lead users for then the masses of like the low skill bad actors, right? So there is a race, right? And you can't prevent, just like I'm sure all of you still end up with spam in your inbox, even though Google and everyone else throws the best possible spam filters at it. There is a race there, right? But there is this, as long as you can get the mass of, like, at the very least, the low skill bad actors to get filtered out, you have a shot. And I acknowledge with the existential risk, if we lead to society declining, you've kind of lost your one chance to get it right or something. But for the vast majority of potential misuse cases, I think you can say it's acceptable to have that risk as long as we make it easy for the good actors to collaborate and get improvements to their filters pushed out very rapidly to as wide an audience as possible. And that is something that the anti-spam community has figured out how to do, how to respond very quickly to new kinds of attacks. But there's no way to prevent all possible kinds of spam attacks. And likewise, it's incumbent on the good actors to figure out how to network and get these systems out quickly. And perhaps resource that with collective resources.
Great. Last one.
Maybe Fazl's a different answer.
I'm extremely in favor of anything that can limit the risk from future open source, open weights models. Because you're absolutely right that ensuring that most of them won't do the particularly nasty, catastrophic, or civ-level threats is a tremendous improvement. But it's also true that over the last several Llama releases, within a couple of days, we've had folks who fine-tune a fully uncensored version, which unfortunately uncensors the bioweapons as well as the offensive speech, and then make it publicly available. And this has always been advertised that this happens, such that it's very easy for anyone who is searching in that area to find these models. So there's a bit of an attention hazard issue in addition to that just does not seem like it's enough. And I don't want to put everything on you to solve all of the problems, but it seems like this is not enough in a world with extremely offense-dominant technologies, which unfortunately, in my view, looks a lot like what biotech actually is. Which, again, we're not there yet. We don't have to worry about it yet, but I'm just curious. This looks much, much, much better than nothing and much better than the current. But do you have any thoughts on how to shore it up?
Yeah, thanks. I want to just say a few points about the previous questions, and then we can try to see if we can add anything there. So yeah, I just want to reiterate how difficult this problem is, and maybe one of the things we could do is put some sort of premium on these models. So say that so Llama 3's license now pushes all the burdens on the user. So Meta actually bears no responsibility for what sort of misuse people will bury. So if you are using Llama 3 to potentially create some sort of dangerous weapons, it's your responsibility. So they are absolutely free of any charges that might come their way. But if you think about software bounties that existed for many decades, the goal is you're tasked to find vulnerabilities in systems and then go out there and get some money for your work in terms of finding vulnerabilities in the system. So maybe one of the efforts that we could put together as a community is to move away from the ideological problem formulation into a problem formulation where people are encouraged to work on this problem, not because they objectively care about AI systems being safe, but because maybe they want to make money. Most people are motivated by making money than they are by motivated for keeping the system safe. But also, if you have regulations and standards in place, who is out there to provide a premium on them, right? So if you say, I, as a third-party evaluator or as an AI Safety Institute, can take your model and pass it through our sandbox and give you some sort of premium on okay, if you get in trouble for any potential misuse or any potential dangers that might come out of these models, this is what I'm willing to back you by, right? So yeah, I think there's a lot of unknowns that we have to figure out, but maybe looking at similar sections of the economy where we had to deal with similar problems might give us some insights into where we want to go. I know Alison wants me to shut up, so I'll pass on the mic.
All right. Thank you so much, guys.